Hi everybody, this is Kirk Gartner for VFXHaiku.com, and today we're going to talk about something pretty cool. I think sometime last week, the internet was sort of abuzz about this new sort of technique that someone developed called creating a cinemagraph. And basically what that is it's sort of like, it's a still image that has a little bit of animation sort of inside of one part of the image. And it kind of looks like something out of Harry Potter. So I'm just going to bring up a web page here so you guys can see what we're talking about here. And this is the person that originally came up with this technique here. Her name is Jamie, and she works with this other photographer. I can't remember her name or the name of the other guy off the top of my head. But basically, this team of two people sort of came up with this concept, and it's kind of cool. Like, you get this still image, but you can sort of put in a certain section of it that has some animation. And some of them are kind of cheesy, and some of them are really, really good. This one here, the shoe, I don't particularly like. This one's kind of interesting. It's sort of got a little bit of a creepy quality to it, or with her eyes kind of darting around there. This one's a little bit creepy too, with her arm moving, but I really prefer the ones that are a little bit more subtle, sort of like this, with just like the wisps of blowing hair, and the rest of the image is completely still. It's just really, really different. What they're really doing here is they're basically just saving out an animated GIF, and the GIF format has been around since like the early 90s, and the ability to do animated GIFs has been around forever too, and people still use them on the internet, like for form avatars and for weird little animations and things like that. But these guys kind of took it to the next level. They sort of like made a classy animated GIF, and basically they're just sort of the root of this is basically in good photography. They're taking a good picture and then just augmenting it slightly with some animation. So I thought that this was really, really cool, really, really interesting idea. And like, if coming from a visual effects background, I mean, we kind of do this stuff all the time, and it's not really that difficult. It's just really, really neat to kind of see it happening in more sort of like a fine art or like fashion art kind of context. Like this one's kind of cool here too, where she's sort of over top of the balcony. One of the things to sort of note about this technique, though, is that all of these images are kind of like, they're set up. Like there's obviously like some prep involved, and there's obviously like some intent behind of all of these photographs. And I mean, this is the kind of thing that would be really, really tough to do if you're sort of in a run and gun situation. But if you have some time to plan out your shoot, and you know you want to do one or two of these along with maybe some video or a bunch of your still images, it's just something extra that you can kind of like add to your bag of tricks. So the thing is, with all these cinemagraphs, each one of them is different, and I'm going to sort of show you the technique that I used to make one of them, but it's not going to help in every situation. Like, every cinemagraph is going to be kind of different, and the way you approach every single cinemagraph is going to be different as well. It's just like any problem or anything you do in visual effects, where you know, some technique might work on one shot, but it might not work on another. So I'm going to show you the one that I did here. It's on my website at kirkgartner.com. So I saw that I saw these animated GIFs on Tuesday, and then I was like, wow, I need to try this out. So me and a bunch of friends did a photo shoot on Wednesday. My goal was basically to get one good cinemagraph out of it. And so this is what I got. I took a bunch of stills and a bunch of video of these window washers cleaning one of the big buildings in downtown Winnipeg. And so since this was the first time that I did it, I was kind of not totally thinking clearly, I guess you could say. And what you really should be doing is taking a still image and some high-res video of every single thing that you shoot. But in this situation, I didn't actually take video of this particular shot. I took a still of it, but I took a video of all the other ones, but not of this particular one. And so I'll show you why that ended up being a bit of a headache right now. So let's just jump into Photoshop and After Effects, and I'll sort of show you the process I used in order to make this cinemagraph. Okay, so we're going to start out in Photoshop here, and actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to, if I can bring up my Finder window here, I'm going to show you the original picture that I took. So this is the original JPEG, and basically what I should have been doing is I should have been taking this still image, and then I should have been taking some video like immediately after it. But in this case, I neglected to do that. And out of all the pictures that I took, I happened to like this one the best, unfortunately. So I sort of made it a little bit harder on myself. This would have been a lot easier. I would have had video that was perfectly aligned with a still, and then I could have just put the animated part over top. But in this case, I needed to do a little bit more surgery, and this is sort of what I'm talking about. It's just like this particular case that I'm going to show you is a little bit unique. Hopefully, it won't be as hard for you guys to replicate this. But yeah, this is sort of a worst case scenario, so you'll have some good ideas on what you'll need to do. So the first thing that I did is I wanted to make like the photograph actually look good. The first thing I did is I went into Photoshop, I cropped the image down to this, I added a whole bunch of color corrections, and one of the main things that I did is I did some perspective correction on it. These are the initial color corrects that I did, and then I basically just used the transform tool in order to kind of straighten out the building a bit and make it look a little bit more straight on, rather than having it look like I was shooting it from underneath, which I actually was. So I straightened it out, and then I just added some grain and a little bit of a color curves adjustment on top of it. Now, the problem is now I don't have video that actually aligned up with this. So I went through and I took a look at all the different video that I shot. So this is one example here. So this has some window washers at a certain level here, and it's kind of zoomed in a little bit tighter on the picture than I really needed. But that's actually good because I can take them and then scale them down and then plop them into the shot. I took some other video here. Let's see what this one looks like. There's this one here, and this guy over here. This is kind of a nice shot too, but I thought the sky was a little boring in it. And I also shot, let's see, I think this one. Yeah, so I had these four to choose from in order to sort of select my video. And what I ended up doing is I ended up picking this one. Basically because they're really in focus and they're really, really big, and it's really obvious that you can sort of see what motions they're doing. And basically the hardest part of this whole thing is, since it's an animated GIF and basically it's looping infinitely, is finding a good loop point for your video. So basically I needed to find a good chunk of video that would loop properly and then overlay it over top of these guys. Now, unfortunately, since you don't want to have still guys in there, I had to paint out these two guys along with the cords that sort of are holding them onto the building here. So they've got these really, really, really long wires, and since this is a tilt shift lens that I shot it with, the bottoms kind of go out of focus, so that made painting it out a little bit of a pain in the butt, but not an insurmountable problem. I was able to do it. So here's the version with them painted out. So this is basically what I used as my base, and this is what I brought into After Effects in order to start my comp. So I'm just going to jump into After Effects here. I've already got it running. And so, oh, I got caps lock on, sorry. So if you watch here, this is running at full quality, so it's taking a little bit to render. But you can see these guys are kind of animated and they're right on top here. And this is at the full size. If I zoom in here, it's going to get really pixelated. And basically, the reason I didn't do this as a super, super high-res comp is because I knew that it would be scaled down to web resolution. I wasn't going to make this animation playable at HD. I didn't need it to hold up at that resolution. Although I did build it at HD, the final version was actually rendered out at like 610 pixels wide here, which is more than enough for web resolution. I actually took a look at all of the different animated GIFs that they had on their site here, and they're all really, really low res. So there was no reason to build this at some ungodly high resolution and just make my life harder on me. So let's just break this down a little bit. So this is the master comp here where everything's sort of being finalized. So I'm just going to jump into the comp before, and this is the one that's actually at HD resolution. So if I zoom in here, I've got this one layer that's basically got my two dudes in it, and they're just covering up a little patch of this window. So if I solo this, this is the only animated chunk in this entire video, and they're kind of just going back and forth and doing their own thing. But it required a lot of work and a lot of surgery to kind of like sort of get these two things looking like they actually sat in the same scene, because the video was a different color, the video was sort of a little bit different. I had to sort of warp and push things around a little bit. So let's take a look at that. I am going to just lock this comp, and I'm going to open a new viewer. Just going to put this to the side here, and I'm going to dig into this comp here. And so this is our pre-comp with our dudes in it. And I'm just going to zoom in here. And so there's a lot of stuff happening. There's color correction, there's a mesh warp, color balance, and then I'm putting grain on top of everything. And both of these guys are separated into their own individual sides. I didn't take the whole thing as one chunk because I needed to basically find different loops for each one of these guys that would kind of work properly. So if you can kind of see here, I think it worked out. If you look at these guys here, you can tell that it's looping, like right there, there's the loop point. When this guy on the left here sort of goes down and then up. It happens in another second here. Goes down, up. So that's the loop point. And on the right guy, you can't really tell. Like, it kind of just looks like they're swaying back and forth. So I think I managed to sort of, figure a good loop point. But here, I'm just going to turn off all these color correction adjustments on both these layers so you can kind of see the massaging that needed to be done. So you can see on the left-hand side here how it's really, really way too bright. The video doesn't match the color adjustments that I'd made to the still image in Photoshop. So I needed to kind of recreate those color adjustments in After Effects. So basically it just involved the levels. The main thing was the mesh warp. And the mesh warp was to kind of just line up some of the edges. So if I zoom in here, if you look at this right-hand edge, you can see how it's a little bit off. And I'm just kind of nudging those pixels down just a tiny, tiny little bit in order to make them line up. And then a little bit of a color balance and a little bit of noise helps seal that together. So the same thing happened on the other side. I'm doing a little bit of a levels adjustment to bring everything down, mesh warp to kind of bring this top beam in alignment with the other one here. And that's basically just done with the mesh warp tool here. And I'm just kind of like taking these points and dragging them down. And then I've got another color balance that's kind of just making things a little bit more cyan to kind of mix in there. And I actually forgot to put noise on that level, or on that one too. That would have made that look a little bit better. So that's essentially the first part. So basically this is, half the battle, or actually maybe 3/4 of the battle, is getting your animated chunk kind of in your scene and then sitting well and actually looking right. So one thing I should mention before we render this thing is basically I was working at an HD resolution comp here, but I wanted to resize it down. So what I did is I took my full HD comp, which is this one here, it's 1920 by 1080, and then I just sandwiched it down into a smaller comp. So what I ended up doing is in this guy here, 610 wide. So this composition is 610 by 240 pixels, and basically I'm just scaling down this composition like to 31.8% in order to make it small. Now I could have done that in the output module of the render queue as well, but I wanted to actually see what it looked like before I rendered it out. If you do it in the render queue, it's sort of a black box. You're not 100% sure exactly what it's going to look like when it's scaled down that small. So I just wanted to make sure that I saw what it looked like. So what I did is I'll just drag this into the render queue here so you can sort of see my settings. You'll just set it to best quality, full resolution. And this is the one main thing here. My comp was set to basically 24 frames per second because that's what my video was shot at. But you don't want to render out your GIF at 24 frames a second. You want to render it at some lower frame rate. Somewhere between 10 and 12 frames per second would probably be okay. I just chose 12 frames per second for mine and rendered it out that way. So rather than make you guys wait, I've actually got this already rendered out here. If I just open up this QuickTime movie here, this is basically it. So this is what I rendered out of After Effects, and I'm just going to set that to loop. And it's just going to go. So it's just your standard QuickTime movie. There's nothing really special about it. So what you really need to do to turn this into an animated GIF, I think that in older versions of After Effects, you actually could render straight to an animated GIF, but for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to do it in CS5. So I actually had to bring this back into Photoshop in order to turn it into an animated GIF, which was kind of a joke, but it works anyway. So let's just do that. So this is kind of a new feature of CS5. You can actually take a QuickTime movie and just drag and drop it right on top of Photoshop, and it's going to open it up. So that's pretty cool. I'm just going to minimize these other two in the background here. So now we've got our animated GIF inside of Photoshop, but of course you can only see the one frame of it. But if you go up to the window menu and choose animation, you'll get a timeline, and you can actually scrub through it. And so you can see every frame of your QuickTime movie. It's pretty cool. So there's really not too much to do in here. All we want to do is just save it out as an animated GIF. So in order to do that, you just go into the File menu and choose Save for Web and Devices. And this might take a second because it's basically got to load up all the frames. It's actually, that was really quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to set it to optimized here, just to one version. And what you want to do is you want to make sure your preset is set to GIF. Now here it goes. Now it's got to process all those frames, so this might take a second or two. There we go. And right now it looks really, really crappy. And basically the reason it looks crappy is because an animated GIF can only store 256 colors at the same time. So you need to really be selective about what colors you're using in order to display your animated GIF. And fortunately, there's a whole bunch of different options it gives you here. The one it's selected by default, selective, probably isn't the best one because it looks really bad. Let's try adaptive, and what that's going to do is it's going to look at every single color in the image and try to choose a palette that works based upon that. And the other thing that you can do is you can choose a dithering method. You can choose noise, pattern, or diffusion. I'm going to try noise and see what that looks like. And sometimes that'll help get rid of some of the color banding that you see in the image. Some of these different dithering methods work better than others, but let's just try noise and see how it looks. Okay, so that actually doesn't look too bad. I think noise is what I used in my final version, but we can try this other one. We can try pattern and see what that looks like, and that's just going to change the noise pattern in here slightly. Okay, that kind of looks a little bit different. I'm just going to zoom in here just so you can take a look at this. Pattern, the reason I don't like using pattern is because it kind of draws attention to itself in some ways. Like you can sort of actually see the pattern in here. When you choose noise, you can sort of see the difference when I swap back and forth here. Noise looks a little bit more random, and it's a little bit more, it doesn't call attention to itself as much as using something like pattern. So those are basically the only really two options that you need to worry about. One thing that I found kind of interesting is you should leave transparency checked on. If you look at the file size right now, this animated GIF is 170K, which is pretty good. But if I turn transparency off, the file size like balloons for some reason. I'm not exactly sure why that is, but I basically just found that if you leave transparency on, it's totally fine and your file size goes down. So there you go. Like with transparency turned off, for some reason the GIF is now 205K, whereas when you leave it on, it's 170. So I'm really not sure why that is. So you basically just leave transparency turned on. So the one final option you need to worry about here is basically the looping options. And right now the looping is set to once. And you pretty much just want to have that set to forever. So the image will just continually loop forever, forever, forever. The last thing you need to do is just hit save. So you hit save, you can just choose the location for your file. I am just going to save mine to the desktop. And that's it. And then you'll end up with a nice animated GIF that you can open up or save, or open up in Firefox or just save to your website and post that way. So just to prove to you that that's actually working, I'm just going to go to the Finder and I'll open up that animated GIF inside of Firefox. And there we go. It's animating away. Looks pretty cool. So that's basically it. That's the technique that you're going to need to use. And I mean, I didn't go too in depth in what I needed to do inside of After Effects, because what you do inside of After Effects to sort of isolate the one element that's moving in your photograph is going to be different for every single picture that you do. So there's not really one technique that I can kind of tell you this is what you do. You basically just have to, isolate or find the one area you want to animate, isolate that with masks, put it on top of the moving area, maybe do some paint work in Photoshop to paint out the area that's supposed to be moving, and then find a good loop point, and that basically will make it look like the animation is repeating itself, and then save that out as a QuickTime movie. Bring it into Photoshop, save it out as an animated GIF, and that's basically it. So if you guys have any questions about anything that I've covered here, I'm sure there's probably some finer points that people might want me to go into more detail on. Just feel free to ask or shoot me an email, put something in the comments, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks a lot, and I hope this helped. Bye.